Okay, so have you ever woken up and suddenly something you were trying to remember, like just clicks right into place, like your brain was working on it, uh, all night long?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have had that kind of aha moment. It can feel almost magical sometimes.
Right. Yeah, it really does. And what if I told you that your breath could actually be the secret conductor of this whole like overnight memory magic thing? We're going to be taking a deep dive today into some brand new research from Northwestern University. And this research suggests that breathing patterns when you're sleeping are actually key to how our brains consolidate memories.
Yeah, that's right. It's really fascinating stuff. We're going to be talking about how breathing actually orchestrates brainwaves, and that process helps turn your daily experiences into long-term memories.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. So tell me, like, what is actually going on in our brains while we sleep? This research mentions three different types of brain waves: slow waves, spindles, and ripples. What are those exactly?
You can almost think of it like a jazz trio that's playing in your brain while you're asleep. So slow waves are like the bass player. They're kind of laying down a steady rhythmic foundation. And they're the ones that are responsible for moving information from your short-term memory to long-term storage.
So they're like the movers who pack up those memories and get them ready for like long-term storage.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have spindles, which are more like the pianist. They add these bursts of faster activity. They're thought to strengthen the connections between your neurons, so making those memories last longer.
Okay, so slow waves are laying down the foundation, and then spindles come in and make those memories sort of more permanent. So then what about these ripples?
Ripples are kind of like the drummer, adding those quick, sharp accents that give the music energy and life. They replay memories during sleep, almost like your brain's practicing what it's learned and solidifying it.
So it's like a band working together to create this symphony of memories while we're asleep.
Yeah, really cool way to think about it.
So these three brainwaves, we used to think they just happened randomly.
Yeah.
But this research actually found they're actually in sync with our breath.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. How is that even possible?
Well, researchers have observed that those brain waves actually peak at specific points in our breathing cycle. For example, those slow waves, the memory movers, those are strongest when you exhale. And the spindles, which are the ones that reinforce the memories, they're more prominent when you inhale. It's like your breath is setting the tempo for this whole memory process.
So you're telling me just breathing steadily can actually impact how well we remember things.
Yeah, that's what this research suggests. Steady, rhythmic breathing that seems to be creating like the ideal conditions for your brain to be processing and storing memories effectively.
Wow. Okay, so if breathing is so crucial for good sleep and memory, what happens when our breathing is disrupted during sleep? Like, for example, people have sleep apnea. Does that mean those memory-making brain waves are getting thrown off?
That seems to be what the research is saying. Yeah. These breathing irregularities can interfere with the synchronization of those brain waves, which could really hinder memory consolidation.
And I know a lot of people with sleep apnea, they often talk about struggling with memory problems. Could that all be linked back to this resorption in breathing and brain waves?
It very well could be. And it's not even just memory that's affected. Research has shown that sleep-disordered breathing can lead to all sorts of cognitive challenges, like having trouble concentrating, problems with decision-making, and there might even be an increased risk of more serious conditions down the line, like stroke, dementia, even Alzheimer's disease.
Wow, those are some pretty serious consequences. This deep dive is definitely making me think twice about taking a good night's sleep for granted.
It's definitely worth paying attention to. The encouraging thing is that the study suggests that treating sleep-disordered breathing, like sleep apnea, could actually lead to improvements in memory function.
Well, that's a relief. So there's hope for people who are experiencing these issues.
Mm-hmm.
But what about for those of us who don't have sleep apnea, but we still want to optimize our sleep and memory? Is there anything that we can do to improve our breathing patterns as we sleep?
That's a great question, and to be honest, researchers are still exploring that. But what's really interesting is that in this Northwestern study, they actually used a device that delivered these gentle puffs of air, and those puffs of air were synchronized with specific brain waves. And they were using that to kind of manipulate the breathing rhythm of the participants during sleep.
Wait, so they were able to actually, like, influence those brain waves just by changing someone's breathing?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. They found that even these like subtle adjustments to breathing patterns, that could actually enhance how those crucial brain waves, those memory-making musicians in your brain, how well they're all synchronized.
You're saying, like, we might not need to be, sleep gurus or master meditators to be able to influence our brain activity when we're sleeping.
That's the exciting part. You know, maybe some simple techniques or even devices could be developed to help people fine-tune their breathing for better sleep and memory.
This is really blowing my mind.
Mhm.
Okay, but before we get ahead of ourselves, let's just recap what we've learned so far.
Okay, sounds good.
Ready to dive back in?
Yeah, let's synthesize these key points. All right, so we've learned so far that your breath is doing a lot more than just, keeping you alive. It's actually playing this vital role in shaping how your brain's working while you're asleep. It's like your breath is this conductor, making sure those memory-making brain waves, those slow waves and spindles and ripples, are all working together.
Right. It's like breathing is like the rhythm section for the whole memory-making band that's happening in our brains. And we talk about how important that steady breathing is, to create that perfect environment for your brain to be processing and storing all those memories. But we also talked about what can happen when breathing gets disrupted, like with sleep apnea. Can you tell me a little bit more about what the consequences of that could be?
Sure. We talked about how that disrupted breathing can interfere with how those brain waves are working together. And that can lead to problems with, how well you're consolidating memories. And it's not just memory that can be affected. Sleep-disordered breathing has been linked to a whole bunch of different cognitive difficulties, so things like struggling to concentrate, having problems with decision-making, even potentially an increased risk of some serious conditions like stroke, dementia, and Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. It sounds like addressing sleep-disordered breathing should be a top priority for anyone who's experiencing those kinds of issues.
Yeah, for sure. Early diagnosis and treatment are key.
So there's hope, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But what about those of us who don't have sleep apnea, but still want to improve their sleep and memory? Are there things that we can do to improve our breathing patterns while we're sleeping?
That's a great question. And, things are getting really interesting here because we're still learning a lot in this area. But there's some promising research to consider. Like in the Northwestern study, they found that even tiny adjustments to breathing patterns could really improve how in sync those memory-making brainwaves are. And they did this using a device that would deliver these gentle puffs of air that were synchronized with specific brainwaves. And that was how they manipulated the participants' breathing rhythms while they were asleep.
Oh, wow. So they were actually able to influence those brainwaves by changing how someone was breathing.
Yeah, and what they found is that even those subtle adjustments to breathing patterns, they could really improve how those brainwaves were synchronized. Those memory-making musicians in your brain.
So you're saying that we might not need to be sleep gurus or master meditators to actually influence our brain activity when we're sleeping?
Yeah, that's what's so exciting about this research, There's a possibility that maybe some simple techniques or even assistive devices could be developed that would help people to better fine-tune their breathing so they could get better sleep and memory.
That would be incredible. It's amazing to think that something as simple as how we breathe could have such a powerful impact on our brains. But, even without those fancy gadgets, just being more aware of the connection between breath and our brain, that could empower us to make changes that can make a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we look at the bigger picture here, it really highlights how interconnected our mind and body are. Even something as fundamental as breathing can have these huge effects on how our brains work and our overall health.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we have more control over our well-being than we might think.
Exactly. And this research, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that we still need to learn about the relationship between breathing and sleep and memory. But this is a really fascinating field, I think it has the potential to really change how we approach sleep and brain health in the future.
I'm curious, what do you think is the most significant implication of this research so far? What makes you excited about the possibilities?
For me, what's most exciting is the potential to develop new ways to improve sleep and how our brains work that are non-invasive. Imagine a future where we could, improve how well people consolidate memories or even reduce the cognitive decline that happens with aging. And all of that just by optimizing breathing patterns during sleep. I mean, that would be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing to think that these simple changes could have such a big impact. Before we wrap up, are there any final thoughts or insights that you want to share with our listeners?
I think it's really important for people to know that this research shows how important it is to get treatment for sleep-disordered breathing. So if you think that you might have sleep apnea or any other issues with your breathing while you're asleep, you need to talk to your doctor. Early diagnosis and treatment, that's really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But even for those of us who don't have sleep apnea, there are things we can do right now. We can all start paying more attention to our breath, not just during the day, but also when we're falling asleep. Notice the rhythm, notice the depth, the quality of each breath.
Exactly. It's a simple practice, but it can really make a difference.
All right. And with that, I think we are ready to move on to our outro.
Hmm.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into breathing and memory, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to think about.
Okay, shoot.
So we've heard that paying attention to our breath, that can, bring this sense of calm and awareness, but could consciously, like cultivating slower, deeper breathing as we're falling asleep, could that actually boost our sleep quality and our memory?
That's a really interesting question, and I think it's definitely worth exploring. Those slow, deep breathing techniques, those are often used in things like yoga and meditation. And that's to, promote relaxation, reduce stress. And we know that stress can really interfere with sleep.
Right, it's like our brains are just stuck in overdrive.
Exactly. They can't shift into sleep mode.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes sense that if we can incorporate those breathing exercises into our bedtime routine, that could create a more peaceful environment for sleep. And then as a result, you'd have better memory consolidation.
I love that. It's like giving your brain a lullaby of breath before you fall asleep.
Yeah, I like that. And it's something you can try tonight. Just spend a few minutes before you go to bed and practice some slow, deep breaths. Really focus on the rise and fall of your chest and just feel that gentle flow of air in and out.
Yeah, and maybe even while you're doing that, visualize those brain waves, those slow waves and spindles and ripples, all syncing up perfectly with each breath and working to solidify those memories.
Yeah, I love that. And who knows, you might just wake up feeling more refreshed and alert and with a little memory boost.
It's like a little gift you can give yourself each night. So to wrap things up, the next time you find yourself struggling to remember something, or if you're just looking for a way to sleep better, remember the power of your breath.
It might seem simple, but as we've seen today, it can have a huge impact on your sleep and your memory.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll leave you to breathe deeply, sleep soundly, and remember vividly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into breathing and memory.